Let's get some insight and analysis now coming out of this weekend's meeting of the ANC's NEC. I'm joined by political analysts Rebone Tau and Professor Susan Booysen. You're a part of the conversation tonight on WhatsApp with your questions and comments on 072-110-5584 or tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Good evening to you all, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. Let's start right there with the a common theme, really, if you listen carefully to what this weekend's meeting was all about, of setting up committees to resolve certain issues, be it the expiry of the term of office of the ANC Womens League. There is a task team that has been set up to solve that, or be it renewal, there is a commission that has been set up to solve that, be it discipline. It's just governing by task team, governing by committees. Prof. Susan, it's a difficult time in the ANC to be making decisions, I suppose.
No, indeed. And nothing testifies to that difficulty and the precarious moment in the ANC's existence better really than today's briefing regarding the weekend's meeting by the National Executive Committee of the ANC and the content of this declaration that was issued. As you so aptly summarized in your introduction, it is task teams, it's panels, it's commissions, and throughout I detect a sense of delegate and defer. Yes, and that can be a method of organizational governance, and that could even be things that happen fast. But the ANC has taught us differently. When you look at the ANC and how it handles these kind of processes, task teams, commissions, recommendations, further in the investigations on how to pursue policies, for example, we are alerted, I believe, to the fact that this could take a very long time, that the ANC is not feeling secure enough to actually just move in and be proactive and say the ANC has agreed to this, will be doing this, and in specific time frames. We do not see the specific time frames here. So the idea that one gets from this is really that the ANC is busy water trading and trying to keep the balls in the air, while this current ANC regime is at the point of almost completing its 5-year term. And one also gets the sense that they are very afraid of and possibly antagonizing the opposing faction and factions, and there are now so many mutations in these factions within the ANC, and it is only when the regional and provincial conferences of the ANC have run a full circle that there will be clearer indications. And in the meantime, it's really an impression that they're playing it safe and rather run the risk of not getting the ANC across as unambiguously, unapologetically pro-reform, renewal, rebuilding, and rather playing it safe, trying not to antagonize anybody in sight.
Yeah. Rebone, is the ANC leadership wary of contradictions to be coming out decisively on particular issues, for example, like the issue of the expiry of the term of office of the Executive Committee of the ANC's Women's League? I mean, we've seen previously decisions of the ANC being contradicted hardly 24 hours after a statement is issued.
Good evening, Tabo and Prof and the viewers at home. I think one must start by saying that what is interesting about whether you can say the powerful faction within the ANC, which is seen as the CR17 faction or CR22 faction as they build up to the December conference, is that recently they did something which is not common in the ANC. The NWC disbanded the Provincial Executive Committee of Mpumalanga and the Eastern Cape, right, and committed them to task teams. You must understand the ANC, how it operates. The NWC was supposed to make recommendations to the NEC. The NWC does not have powers to dissolve, but things are happening differently under this leadership, which are new things within the ANC. Now, the question is that when they took that decision, why did they not say on the Women's League, let's convert the Women's League to a task team, because their mandate lapsed two years ago, so that they can go to conference. But you can see that they are taking the longer route, to deal with the Women's League. We know that the president of the Women's League also is waiting for the sentencing on the 1st of April on her case. And the constitution of the ANC at that time, when it was supposed to kick in, Rule 25.70 did not kick in. And now when we read the statement, then we're told that no, the matter is now taken to officials. And now the question is, why take this thing to officials when the constitution is clear that once you are charged or once you appear before court, you need to be temporarily suspended, And so this faction within the ANC seems to take the longer route instead of dealing with issues and giving confidence to South Africans that indeed, this is a new dawn or Tumamina or era that we are doing things differently. When you talk about renewal, the rebuilding process of the ANC, because they need to take those difficult decisions and be decisive and be clear. So I feel that the Women's League should have been converted at that time when which was I think a few weeks ago, when the Mpumalanga and Eastern Cape were dissolved and converted to task teams.
What is the task team of Thandi Modise and Nathi Mthethwa and Jenny Schreider supposed to be looking at as far as the status? Because if the status is expired, it's as clear as that it is expired. That's what, as you put it, the decision they took on the PEC in Mpumalanga and the PEC in the Eastern Cape.
I mean, for an example, you look at Nathi Mthethwa, he's the former chair of political education in the previous NEC. And I can tell you, go back to the ANC resolution in 2012. It resolved in a decade of a cadre. And if you look at his era as the chair of the political education, nothing was done, So I don't know what is it that they're going to do that is going to be extremely progressive, to look at the status, because the reality of the matter, we know provinces of the Women's League, regions of the Women's League, their mandate has lapsed. So it's just converting them and taking them to conference, I don't know why the ANC is playing this politics, of prolonging things, because I don't see them doing things different and coming up with something that needs an intelligent person to really look into what needs to happen with the Women's League.
Prof. Booysen, the actual matter of the guilty verdict on the ANC Women's League president itself within the league, has it put a snag on the roadmap to their national conference, you think?
I don't think so.
Sorry, Rebone, that's for Prof. Susan. Yeah?
Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Rebone and Tabu. I really think it has, because the Women's League can really turn a new page and start doing things differently and bring in renewal and bring in organizational building. The Women's League as it is extremely weak. It has achieved so little in its past term, and its current leadership seem to be more concerned about staying in power or bringing in a few select people who can complement their ranks than being out there in a time when there are so many women's issues that need to be addressed drastically, urgently. And the Women's League has not been making an impact. So it has really not played that role that it should have. And so just turning that page and getting preparations in place for a definitive conference. We hope that is still possible, that the Women's League is not totally down the drain, but to turn the page and get new procedures in place and new people elected to get it done very fast. I'm surprised it has taken that long. I guess it is also because the Women's League perhaps have nailed colors to the mast, at least tentatively, in supporting Lindiwe Sisulu as a candidate, or Lindiwe Sisulu with her presidential ambitions has indicated that she's indicated that she's interested in that position. And she joined the Women's League shortly after 2017 when they had not endorsed her and made a clear association there. So it is possible that the main body of the ANC are perhaps wary of antagonizing power brokers within the ANC Women's League, who perhaps can mobilize themselves, but so far they have not been successful in doing that. So there is something that restrains the main body of the ANC from acting more definitively, whereas they can really only make a better impression on South Africa should they really put lots of power in it. And Rebone is exactly right. I do not see the people in that task team having the time and the energy to do definitive things to really turn around that Women's League. The space is there and the work just invites to be done, but it is not happening.
Right, Rebone, you were quick there to say
something quickly.
Yeah, you completely disagree.
I want to laugh a bit with what Prof is saying, to remind people that if you remember, Natim Teta was the coordinator of the ANC Youth League when Colin Maine was elected as the president of the ANC League. So he's got a track record.
We wanted to talk about the ANC Women's League. You don't think that the guilty verdict on the president of the ANC Women's League would put a snag on the roadmap to the national conference? What about considering, for example, like issues like Zandile Gumede, also now facing a court challenge? These are all supporters of Bathabile Dlamini, and how those play out in this roadmap to the national conference.
I think for me, when I look at the roadmap in terms of, you look at the structure itself, you've got the Secretary General of the Women's League who's still in office, you've got the Deputy Secretary General of the Women's League who's still in office. So you've got a structure that is able to really go to conference, It's just that the difference is that the president of the Women's League might not actually be available to serve, to contest this conference, And I think that she should actually have just steps aside, from just a moral point of view, and to say, I will do the right thing, I'll step aside, I'll respect the constitution of the ANC, because both the leagues derive their existence from the ANC constitution. So, so she is binded by that ANC constitution. But I think organizationally, the preparation, it won't be, because the result of the matter, a lot of people don't know that the Women's League has been divided for a very long time. It's just that they are not, we don't see the public spades as we see in the ANC politics, but there is a lot of divisions in the Women's League. I'll give an example, I remember a few years ago, immediately after the ANC conference, after 2017, I think around 2018, the Women's League had an event, and you saw the Deputy President of the ANC Women's League, Memantombela, the Premier of Free State, saying to President Ramaphosa, we will protect you when you are attacked by anyone. I was even shocked, to hear such being said, because one would then think this is just after, Nazareth, people are still, hung over, the issue of Comrade Nkosana Dlamini Zuma, having not being able to make it as who was their candidate, as the preferred candidate as the Women's League. So you see some of this, because politics, unfortunately, of today is not about ideology, it's more about survival, so people are looking at their own survival, so I don't see it being much of a harm.
Let's talk then about how the NEC is viewing the work and the leadership of the National Youth Task Team. In a statement, they're saying they're commanding the leadership of the ANC Youth League Task Team. In fact, how they're handling the whole renewal and rebuilding process, they're saying it's beginning to take shape with a number of regional meetings or conferences being held.
Thabo, I've got a different view on the Youth League. The Youth League need to be rebuilt organically and not a task team, I don't see the Youth League being the Youth League that we knew, maybe you can say, this year marked 10 years, since the expulsion of Julius Malema from the ANC and the Youth League, I don't see the Youth League, being militant, being radical. unfortunately, we're just going to see a youth league, and which is very interesting because the youth league in its nature is militant and radical. For the first time, you're not even hearing any noise, about these regional conferences that are sitting. The youth league in its nature, right now there will be some buzz, throughout the country that indeed young people are preparing to go to their elective conference, So it's very silent, it's very quiet, this process, which is unheard of, So it really tells you that a lot is happening that we'll see in the next few months. We're not even clear of the exact date now, when will this Congress of the ANC youth league sit, but it's really unheard of to have a very silent and quiet process of the youth league going to its national conference. It's really culturally youth league that we know.
Yeah. Prof, weigh in on the leadership of the ANC Youth League task team and the work that they've been doing in renewal and rebuilding.
Yes. Now, a lot of work has been going into trying to get this youth league on the ground, on his feet again, but I completely agree with Rebone that it is not an organic organization as it stands at the moment. It is really a manufactured, a carefully constructed organization that has been ineffective over the best part of a decade. And it's so important for a viable organization to have that youth league, any youth league, feeding in new leadership into the organization. We see the scarcity of young leaders in the top structures of the ANC nowadays. There are a few, but they are really few and far between. And there hasn't been this organic renewal in the ANC that it really, really needs so desperately. And so the Youth League really also has its work cut out for it. But it is not the kind of dynamic renewal, full of new ideas, kind of new youth league that the organization really needs. And this also reminds me of another part of today's statement where it was referred to the fact that Rebone Tau, as head of the ANC's Electoral Commission, has made 770 determinations, he and those working with him, on candidate selections and which candidates had actually emerged in last year's local government election. And there are 770, the statement says, such determinations. And yet the ANC is not quite sure yet how it will implement those recommendations and determinations. It says in the statement, and this is a classic formulation, another one in the statement, that the NEC urges the NWC, the National Working Committee of the ANC, to propose the plan for the urgent implementation of these recommendations. Now, that truly doesn't sound as if we can expect these recommendations to be implemented next week or even next month. That whereas it's so necessary that it gets done, the ANC will have to show that it can actually get some urgent action in this, because it is councils that are at stake. It is stability of local government in a situation where local government is desperately deficient. In that kind of context, that is going to add additional destabilization of local government, and it is going to take a long time to correct that.
Yeah. Let's talk then about the processes to the 54th or 55th National Conference. And one of the headlines, of course, we are running now tonight is around the 100 million rands tax debt, apparently, which the ANC says they know nothing about, that has been reported. But there have also been a number of reports, for example, this past weekend around this cash drain within the ANC, hampering a whole lot of the processes of the leagues being held and Women's League not getting the resources that they require and so on and so forth. How does the cash drain within the ANC play out in the leadership race, right? One of the recommendations that they talk about coming out of this meeting is the Rebone Tau recommendations on the election of National Executive Committee members and how those processes of lobbying in some instances have been said they use brown envelopes or whatever sort of money that exchanges hands. How does the cash drain within the ANC play out in its or impact its leadership race, Prof?
Yes, we can only assume that it will indeed play a big role again, and that will probably be from politicians' private stashes that they've been managing to put away over the years. And we also have heard specifically in case of eThekwini, for example, that there are references to the brown envelopes passing around, and that the faction associated with Zandile Gumede is more flush than the other faction, and one certainly wonders and fears that it can have a huge impact. And it is also well known that politicians target public finances in municipalities in the provinces to help them in due course pay their dues and ensure that they look after their camps, those who will be supporting their elections, and that payback will come when they get into government positions. And that becomes more precarious as the position of lack of funds unfolds, and basic structures of the ANC as organization are not well maintained, and staff are not well maintained in terms of salaries and motivated to give their all for the organization. So there's really much evidence already that the drain on the ANC funds has got, and that's also much to do with the Public Funding Act that became law, and the fact that the ANC hasn't quite got the gravitas of a growing organization that's going from strength to strength anymore. And then business organizations and volunteer organizations are less likely to give unambiguous support to an organization like that. So it is a vicious circle in which the less funding, the less performance there is, the less funding there will be. And we've already seen that one donor had to come in a month or two ago and made a big contribution. We saw that in the declaration of the party funds to help pay head office salaries and other provincial office salaries. And that is really a situation where it spirals downward, and my staff are not as motivated as they were some time ago. And in that kind of context, brown bags and brown bag envelopes, envelopes probably as big as bags, will certainly be playing a big role, unfortunately, but that is probably what we see in incipient form at this stage.
Rebone, before you weigh in on the immigration question and the ANC's posture to get behind the Minister Aaron Motsoaledi, is it a political thing, considering that there's been some civil society organizations who have actually called for his head, in particular this past weekend? But weigh in firstly on the cash drain and how this is going to play out in the leadership race.
The fact of the matter that the ANC needs to find ways, or new ways, how it nominates its leaders, because you can't have, as long as you have slayed politics, money will still be a factor, because people have got nothing to offer besides money. But when people are elected on merit and based on their capacity, then you will see a different organization where money won't be used, but you will have platforms where people are put out there to the membership of the ANC and to talk about the kind of things that they will do for the organization. So unfortunately, moving forward, money will still remain a factor. But one thing I was saying to someone yesterday, Thabo, was that it's very interesting. We see the former president, Thabo Mbeki, quite often speaking about the ANC, but he's never spoken about the financial status of the ANC. And when you speak to some within the ANC, they can tell you that even the issue of not paying staff members within the ANC is not a new thing. You can go back to the era when President Mbeki was still the president of the ANC. There were times where provincial secretaries were not paid of the ANC. So the ANC really needs to really find ways on how to really move forward, and also how it elects its leadership, and so that it stops with this brown envelope. So that will also help to strengthen the organization, to strengthen also the state, the kind of people that they deploy within the state.
Do we know what the Kalima report is suggesting on how NEC members should be elected?
No, I'm not sure, so I'll not speak much on that.
That's fine. I've not had a look at it myself, but I thought maybe you were privy to it somehow with all sorts of leaks that happen these time around. Let's talk then a little bit about the posture of the NEC. I mean, it's a hotly disputed issue currently. We've got civil society saying the ANC has taken the anti-migrant stance, or at least the minister has taken the anti-migrant stand. Well, the NEC are saying they're getting fully behind the minister and the minister fulfilling the mandate. Is this a political decision, you think, that the NEC is taking here?
Personally, Thabo, I think the problem with the ANC and government or the cabinet, they are not looking at these issues, from what is the reality on the ground. And why I will say this, President Ramaphosa in 2018 appointed the former Deputy Chief Justice Rebone Tau as the special envoy to Lesotho. He again later appointed the special envoy, the likes of Baleka Mbete and I think Sidney Mfumari, to Zimbabwe, right? And now we've got Jeff Radebe, a special envoy to Swaziland. Why does he have all the special envoys? It's because of the instabilities in those countries. You see, so we can't have a government or a party that does not also look at what the political instability in the region, what impact will it have on South Africa? A government or an ANC that does not hold leaders within the region accountable for their own citizens. Because the reality of the matter is that most of these migrants that come to this country are fleeing because of the challenges that they are facing. We know also what is happening now in Mozambique, and if the situation is not well also handled in Mozambique, we're going to see more influx of Mozambicans. We know what is happening in West Africa, the countries like Burkina Faso, Mali. So the reality of the matter is that they need to also they can't be occupying all these also positions within SADC. We know that President Ramaphosa was the AU chair during the year of silencing the gun 2020. And if we are to put COVID-19 aside, what is it that President Ramaphosa did during his tenure in advancing this silencing the guns 2020 in the continent? Nothing was done. South Africa had a seat at the UN Security Council. What is it that they did at the time? Nothing was done. That was country. So I think that they are just playing to the gallery because of what is happening in the country and not really looking at the role that South Africa has continued to play in these countries in terms of mediation. Zimbabwe is where it is because South Africa, when it was mediating that process, we know that the global party agreement in Zimbabwe till today is not fully implemented. We know in Lesotho one of the issues is the security sector reforms. In Zimbabwe also one of the issues is the security sector reforms, which are on the table, and the ANC is not speaking on those things. The South African government is not speaking on those things.
Prof, what do you think? The migration question, are they playing to the gallery? Is this going to be, I suppose, also a very important issue within the ANC's own elective race?
Yes, indeed, Thabo. I really think the ANC is in a very tight spot when it gets to migration issues and civil society mobilization and populism, and in some ways reactionary politics coming about, and yet the ANC does not really know how to handle this. And today's statement certainly doesn't provide the answers either, because it's really trying to play to both galleries, both to law enforcement and controlled migration and legal, and emphasizing the necessity of being legally in this game and legally in a citizenry of South Africa. And yet the realities on the ground is that there's been widespread employment practices, widespread in communities, acceptance of foreigners and acceptance of some, not just some commercial practices for convenience sake, but also renting informal housing structures to foreigners, and it's really become an ingrained part of society. And yet there is also now growing in a growing way, but it's not new. If we think back from 2008, the widespread xenophobic attacks in South Africa experienced then. So it's not new at all, and policy has not made any progress in South Africa. And I really think there is such a huge need for government and the ANC to disentangle this systematically and get systematic, clear-cut policy in place, unambiguous, but today's statement was definitely not the beginning of that. It is just filled with ambiguities and doublespeak, really, and statements that are at odds with practice on the ground.
Let's talk about then, finally, as we wrap up, the broad sense that we're getting here. One, first, is that the NEC came out of this and they said, let's look at the party 10 years from now. They're already talking about 2032, I think. But what is interesting is that they're calling on social partners in broad society, particularly alliance partners, to weigh in on what the mission of the ANC should be for the next decade, right? Looking at that particular approach, but also looking at the approach of the setting up of the task teams that are not made up largely by NEC members, but by members of the ANC coming from society to come and make decisions around the renewal and the rebuilding of the ANC. What will be the impact of that in the party, at least in the next 10 years?
Yeah, from my side, I think the Renewal Commission is largely ANC members and also not always in active politics, but serious ANC stalwarts are coming in on the vision side for the ANC. The Disciplinary Commission was also sympathetic people, but often not active in the ANC. But on vision side, I'm actually surprised that the ANC makes such a big thing of developing a vision for 2032, and really on an issue on which there is supposed to be so much clarity, how to renew and rebuild the organization. There should really be no doubt as to where the ANC should be going. I think that is being the mission of Cyril Ramaphosa's tenure as president of the ANC since 2017. Being very clear-cut on what kind of renewal and cleaning up of government beyond, to take government and the ANC beyond corruption and capture. And that is the vision that we heard from President Ramaphosa in his Tumamina speech in early 2018. And I've always thought that is very clear that that is where the ANC is going, and that is the big unifying theme in the ANC, and that is the theme that will help the ANC and Ramaphosa win the 2019 election very definitively. So when one looks at a whole commission to achieve this, and the statement does emphasize, yes, consult with all structures, engage with all structures. So I think it's a longer term process to try to get the ANC to act in unison and to mobilize people in the process of constructing this vision to become more united and see. It's really a fishing expedition to see what new can come out of that. But it's really something, I think it is a disservice to the ANC that it acknowledges that at this stage, this advanced point in the game where the ANC hasn't got much time left to prove that it can really renew and rebuild itself, to say, let's come together and a longer-term process to get the vision together.
Rebone, the decision to bring in members of the ANC, veterans, probably staunch members, stalwarts of the ANC, who are not currently active within the NEC, to come and lead structures like the disciplinary appeals, the various task team, bringing in Gwen Ramogopa, for example, into the SG's office. Is this a reflective thing? Is it a factional thing? Is it a renewal thing? What do you make of that approach?
I think one must start by saying that when you look at the modus operandi of President Ramaphosa, it's very interesting. We saw, this year during the SONA, we appointed committees. It's really not common in the ANC that the DC and the appeals committee is chaired by people who are not National Executive Committee members, So he's like running a parallel organization within the ANC, just like he's running a parallel state within the state, So that's how President Ramaphosa, with problems that he can solve, or he does not have confidence in people, he will outsource and bring people, to come and do the work for him. So that's how he's literally operating, and that's how he has been operating. So this says much about him and his leadership style, that he does not have confidence in the current leadership. He must technically, I think, tell South Africans that I think I have failed as the political head to give political direction to this organization, to rebuild this organization, to renew this organization over the past 5 years,
Quick one, 30 seconds. Are you expecting any fireworks in Mpumalanga this weekend?
It will be a very interesting conference. This conference, we've been awaiting this conference for the past 6 years. And finally, and unfortunately, people had to die in the process, by the way, building up to this provincial conference. People had to get ahead. So we have like in Demand and Mandla, who will be contesting each other. We know that the premier of Mpumalanga, she's likely also to want to contest a position in the top 5, which is very interesting because she dumped her faction at some point and started working with Mandla, and we've seen how even the Women's League, in terms of, you look at the pronouncement, her name is number last on the additional members. You look at that faction that she thought that she could consolidate power with, have really dumped her. So it's going to be a very interesting conference, but Mandla seems like he is going to take this conference.